My name is Ethan, and until recently, I was a 28-year-old financial analyst living in the heart of Chicago. I reveled in the city's energy, the towering skyscrapers, and the constant hum of ambition. I wore impeccably tailored suits, frequented upscale restaurants, and generally lived a life far removed from the one I grew up in. That life, the one I tried so hard to forget, was back on a small, struggling farm in rural Illinois. My parents, bless their kind, hardworking souls, were farmers. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved my parents dearly. They sacrificed everything to give me a good education, encouraging my academic pursuits and always supporting my dreams, even when those dreams led me far away from the fields they toiled in. They were salt-of-the-earth people, honest, genuine, and deeply connected to the land. But as I climbed the corporate ladder, I started to see their way of life as well as a bit of an embarrassment. It wasn't that I was ashamed of them, exactly. It was more like I was ashamed of being them. I worked hard to cultivate an image of sophistication and success, and a farmer's son just didn't quite fit the picture. I avoided talking about my background with my colleagues, subtly steering conversations away from my childhood. I'd cringe internally when my parents would call, their voices thick with a rural twang that sounded so out of place in my sleek, modern office. I even started avoiding visits home. The farm, with its rusty tractors, muddy boots, and the ever-present smell of manure, felt like a different world. A world I was desperate to leave behind. My parents, of course, noticed my increasing distance. They'd try to coax me back with promises of home-cooked meals and stories about the latest crop, but I always had an excuse, a crucial meeting, a looming deadline, anything to avoid facing the reality of my roots. My father, Thomas, was a man of few words, but his eyes held a deep wisdom that I often ignored. He had weathered countless storms, both literal and metaphorical, always emerging stronger and more resilient. My mother, Martha, was the heart of the family, her warmth and generosity radiating outwards to everyone she met. They were good people, simple people, and they deserved better than a son who was ashamed to acknowledge them. My carefully constructed world began to crumble when I received a call from my mother. Her voice was strained, filled with a worry that cut through my carefully constructed defenses. The farm was in trouble. A prolonged drought had decimated their crops, and they were facing foreclosure. They were on the brink of losing everything they had worked so hard for. I felt a pang of guilt, sharp and immediate. I had been so caught up in my own ambitions that I had completely neglected the people who had given me everything. I knew I had to do something, but the thought of actually returning to the farm, of confronting the life I had tried so hard to escape, filled me with dread. How could I, a sophisticated financial analyst, possibly help a failing farm? And even more terrifying, what would my colleagues think if they found out the truth about my background? But as I listened to my mother's desperate plea, I knew I couldn't turn my back on them. I promised her I would come home and see what I could do. This was not just about a farm, but about my family and my own identity. What would I find when I returned? The drive back to the farm felt like a journey back in time. The gleaming skyscrapers of Chicago slowly gave way to endless stretches of cornfields, the air growing noticeably fresher and cleaner with each mile. As I pulled into the familiar driveway, I was greeted by the sight of my parents, their faces etched with worry and exhaustion. The farm itself looked even more dilapidated than I remembered, the paint peeling from the barn, the fields parched and cracked. My parents embraced me warmly, their relief palpable. For the next few days, I immersed myself in the details of their financial situation. It was worse than I had imagined. Years of declining crop yields, coupled with rising costs and a series of bad luck, had left them deep in debt. The bank was threatening to foreclose, and they had no idea how to turn things around. I spent hours poring over their accounts, trying to find a way to salvage the situation. I contacted the bank, attempting to negotiate a loan modification or an extension, but they were unyielding. They saw the farm as a risky investment, and they were not willing to take a chance. I tried to apply my financial knowledge, looking at potential solutions to solve the farm's debt and productivity problems, but I found my expertise was limited in this area. As I worked, I couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness. I was used to dealing with complex financial transactions, but this was different. This was personal. This was about my parents' livelihood, their legacy, their entire way of life. I felt a growing respect for the hard work they had put in for so long. One evening, as we sat around the kitchen table, my father spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. "I don't know what we're going to do, Ethan," he said. "We've tried everything." My mother reached across the table and took his hand, her eyes filled with love and support. "We'll figure something out," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We always do." Looking at their tired faces, I realized that I couldn't let them down. I had to find a way to save the farm, not just for them, but for myself. I had to confront my past and embrace the life I had tried so hard to leave behind. That night, I resolved to use all my skills and resources to fight for my family. I had a new purpose now, one that extended beyond my own personal ambitions. But could I overcome the odds stacked against them? I began to explore alternative solutions, researching government assistance programs, grants, and other forms of financial aid available to struggling farmers. I also started to learn more about modern farming techniques, sustainable agriculture, and innovative ways to increase crop yields. I spent hours talking to my parents, listening to their experiences and learning from their wisdom. I quickly realized that my initial assumptions about farming were completely wrong. It wasn't just a simple, outdated way of life. It was a complex and challenging business, requiring a deep understanding of science, economics, and technology. My parents, despite their lack of formal education, were incredibly knowledgeable and resourceful. As I delved deeper into the world of agriculture, I began to see the farm in a new light. I saw the beauty of the land, the importance of the work, and the deep connection between people and nature. I started to appreciate the values that my parents had instilled in me: hard work, honesty, and a commitment to community. But I also realized that the farm needed to adapt to survive. The old ways of doing things were no longer sustainable. They needed to embrace new technologies, diversify their crops, and find new markets for their products. It was a daunting task, but I was determined to help them succeed. I knew I could bring my financial expertise while learning from my parents' experience. One of my first ideas was to create a website and start selling their produce directly to consumers. I knew that there was a growing demand for locally grown, organic food, and I believed that they could tap into that market. I also suggested that they explore the possibility of adding agritourism activities to the farm, such as farm tour, corn mazes, and pumpkin patches. My parents were hesitant at first. They were used to doing things the old-fashioned way, and they were skeptical of new technologies and marketing strategies. But they trusted me, and they were willing to give it a try. I was going to have to convince them that this was their best and only chance. I spent weeks building a website, creating social media accounts, and reaching out to local restaurants and grocery stores. I also helped them prepare for their first farm tour, cleaning up the barn, setting up displays, and creating informative signs. It was hard work, but it was also incredibly rewarding. I felt like I was finally contributing something meaningful to my family and to the community. Would all this hard work pay off, or would they be forced to abandon their family's legacy? The day of the farm tour arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. I had invited everyone I knew, my colleagues from Chicago, my old friends from high school, even some of my old professors. I wanted to show them what my parents were doing and to get their support. To my surprise, the turnout was huge. People were genuinely interested in learning about farming and in supporting local businesses. My parents, initially shy and awkward, quickly warmed up to the crowd, sharing their stories and answering questions with enthusiasm. As I watched them interact with the visitors, I felt a surge of pride. They were in their element, sharing their passion for farming with the world. I realized that I had been wrong to be ashamed of them. They were not just farmers, they were stewards of the land, providers of food, and pillars of the community. I had learned from them what was truly important in life, and I was starting to understand my own values better. The farm tour was a huge success. They sold out of all their produce, signed up dozens of new customers for their website, and generated a lot of positive buzz in the community. My parents were thrilled, and they started to believe that they might actually be able to save the farm. But the success of the farm tour was just the beginning. They still had a long way to go to overcome their financial difficulties. They needed to find a way to increase their crop yields, reduce their costs, and secure long-term contracts with local businesses. I was starting to feel hopeful, but there were still many challenges ahead. Would their initial success translate into a lasting turnaround for the farm, or would they face further setbacks? One day, While I was working on the farm, I received a phone call from my boss in Chicago. He had heard about the farm tour, and he was curious to know what I was doing back in Illinois. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. I had been keeping my work life and my farm life separate, afraid of what my colleagues would think. But then I decided to be honest. I told him about my parents' financial troubles, about my efforts to help them save the farm, and about my newfound appreciation for agriculture. To my surprise, he was incredibly supportive. He told me that he admired my dedication to my family and that he was impressed by my entrepreneurial spirit. He even offered to help. He had some connections in the food industry, and he offered to introduce me to some potential investors and customers. I was stunned. I had expected judgment and ridicule, but instead, I received support and encouragement. With my boss's help, I was able to secure a few key contracts with local restaurants and grocery stores. These contracts provided a stable source of income for the farm and allowed my parents to invest in new equipment and technologies. They also received a grant from the state government to implement sustainable farming practices. Things were finally starting to turn around. The farm was becoming more profitable, more sustainable, and more connected to the community. My parents were happier and more hopeful than they had been in years. I felt like I had finally found my purpose in life. I had come to the farm to help my parents, but I had ended up helping myself as well. I had rediscovered my roots, embraced my past, and found a new appreciation for the values that I had once tried to leave behind. I was no longer ashamed of being a farmer's son. In fact, I was proud of it. Could this unexpected turn of events lead to a permanent change in my career path and my relationship with my family? As the farm began to thrive, I faced a difficult decision. I had to choose between my career in Chicago and my newfound passion for farming. I loved the excitement and challenge of my job as a financial analyst, but I also felt a deep connection to the land and a strong desire to help my parents build a sustainable future for their farm. I spent weeks wrestling with this decision. I talked to my parents, my boss, my friends, and my mentors. Everyone had a different opinion, but ultimately, the choice was mine. Finally, after much soul-searching, I made up my mind. I decided to leave my job in Chicago and move back to the farm permanently. It was a difficult decision, but it was the right one for me. I knew that I could make a bigger difference in the world by helping my parents build a sustainable farm than I could by crunching numbers in a corporate office. And I knew that I would be happier living a life that was more connected to nature and to my family. My colleagues were surprised by my decision, but they were also supportive. They understood that I was following my heart and that I was pursuing a life that was more meaningful to me. My boss even offered to let me work remotely on a part-time basis so that I could continue to use my financial skills to help the farm. With my decision made, I began the process of transitioning my life from Chicago to the farm. I sold my condo, packed up my belongings, and said goodbye to my friends and colleagues. It was a bittersweet experience, but I was excited about the future. I was ready to embrace my new life as a farmer. How would my life in Chicago compare to the challenges and rewards of life on the farm? The transition was not easy. I had to learn a lot about farming, from planting and harvesting to animal care and marketing. I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I learned from them, and I gradually became more confident in my abilities. My parents were incredibly supportive, teaching me everything they knew about farming and sharing their wisdom and experience. They were also patient with my mistakes, understanding that I was still learning. Slowly, I began to feel like a real farmer, not just a city boy playing dress-up. As I worked alongside my parents, I began to see them in a new light. I saw their resilience, their dedication, and their deep connection to the land. I realized that they were not just farmers, they were true stewards of the earth, working tirelessly to provide food for their community and to protect the environment. I also began to appreciate the simple pleasures of farm life, the beauty of the sunrise over the fields, the smell of freshly cut hay, the taste of homegrown vegetables. I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I had never experienced in the city. I started to wonder if I had truly found my calling. Over time, the farm continued to thrive. They expanded their crops, added livestock, and built a thriving agritourism business. They became a model for sustainable agriculture in the region, inspiring other farmers to adopt more environmentally friendly practices. I was proud to be a part of their success. I used my financial skills to manage the farm's finances, to negotiate contracts, and to secure funding for new projects. I also used my marketing skills to promote the farm to a wider audience, attracting new customers and building a strong brand. Had I found a way to combine my old skills with my new passion, one day my parents called me into the kitchen. They had something important to tell me. They sat me down at the table and my father began to speak. "Ethan," he said, "your mother and I have been talking, and we've decided that it's time for us to retire." I was surprised, but not shocked. My parents had been working hard their entire lives and they deserved to rest. But I was also worried. I didn't know if I could run the farm on my own. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "And what about the farm?" My mother smiled. "We're going to travel," she said. "We want to see the world and we want to spend more time with our grandchildren. And as for the farm," my father continued, "we want you to take over." I was speechless. I had never expected this. I was honored that they trusted me to carry on their legacy, but I was also terrified. I knew that running a farm was a huge responsibility, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. But then I looked at my parents' faces, and I saw the love and trust in their eyes. I knew that I couldn't let them down. I took a deep breath and said, "I'll do it." My parents beamed with joy. They hugged me tightly, and they thanked me for everything I had done for them. They told me that they were proud of me and that they knew I would be a great farmer. With my parents' blessing, I officially took over the farm. It was a daunting task, but I was determined to succeed. I worked hard every day, learning from my mistakes and building on my successes. Over time, I became a skilled and successful farmer. I continued to implement sustainable practices, to expand the farm's crops, and to build a strong brand. The farm became a thriving business, providing healthy food for the community and protecting the environment. What new challenges and opportunities would come with this new level of responsibility? Years later, as I stood in the middle of my fields, watching the sun set over the horizon, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I had never thought possible. I had come a long way from the city boy who was ashamed of his farming roots. I had embraced my past, found my purpose, and built a life that was both meaningful and fulfilling. I had also learned a valuable lesson about the importance of family, community, and connection to the land. I was grateful for the sacrifices that my parents had made for me, and I was proud to carry on their legacy. And as I looked out over my farm, I knew that I had finally found my place in the world. I was a farmer, and I was proud of it. I had come full circle, from running away from my roots to embracing them. But there was one final twist in the story. One evening, I received a call from an old colleague in Chicago. He informed me that the financial firm I used to work for was under investigation for fraudulent activities. It turned out that the sophisticated world I had once craved was built on a foundation of lies and deceit. I was shocked and disgusted. I realized that I had narrowly escaped a life of corruption and dishonesty. I was grateful that I had chosen to leave that world behind and embrace a life of honesty, integrity, and connection to the land. It seemed I had traded the allure of success for something far more valuable. The investigation into the financial firm led to several arrests and convictions. Many of my former colleagues lost their jobs and reputations. I watched the news with a mix of sadness and relief. I was sad for the people who had been caught up in the scandal, but I was relieved that I had made the right choice. The experience reinforced my belief in the importance of living an honest and ethical life. I was grateful for the values that my parents had instilled in me and for the opportunity to build a life based on integrity and purpose. I had come to the farm seeking to save my family, but I had ultimately saved myself. Had I truly escaped that world, or would there be repercussions for my former life? And so, I continued to farm, to build my business, and to live a life that was both meaningful and fulfilling. I never forgot the lessons I had learned, and I always remained grateful for the opportunity to live a life connected to the land, to my family, and to my community. My life as a farmer was far from the sophisticated world I had once craved, but it was a life I wouldn't trade for anything. But just as I settled into my new life, another piece of my past resurfaced. One day, a sleek black car pulled up to my farm. A man in an impeccably tailored suit emerged, and I immediately recognized him. It was my old rival, Chad, from my finance days. Chad, who had always sneered at my humble beginnings, now stood on my land, looking decidedly uncomfortable. "Ethan," he said, his voice dripping with forced pleasantry, "fancy seeing you here. I heard about your little farm." My hackles rose. I knew this visit couldn't be innocent. "What do you want, Chad?" I asked, cutting straight to the chase. He chuckled nervously. "Well, Ethan, old buddy, old pal, it seems our former firm is in a bit of a bind. Some oversights were made, and now the authorities are sniffing around. They're looking at everyone's past dealings, and, well, your name came up." My blood ran cold. Had my past caught up with me after all? What exactly are they looking for? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Chad hesitated, then blurted out, "Some of the trades you executed, Ethan, they weren't exactly above board. Nothing I can't smooth over, of course, but it would be helpful if you could, shall we say, corroborate our version of events." I stared at him, my mind racing. They wanted me to lie to protect them from the consequences of their actions. And if I didn't, what would they do? And what if I don't corroborate? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. Chad's smile faltered. "Well, Ethan," he said, his eyes hardening, "let's just say it would be a shame if the authorities started digging into your little farm. Permits, regulations, that sort of thing. You know how these things can be." He was threatening my family, my livelihood. The nerve of this guy, the anger that had been simmering inside me finally boiled over. "Get off my property, Chad," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "And tell your bosses that I won't lie for them. I won't protect them. I'll tell the truth, the whole truth, even if it means bringing them all down." Chad's face turned red with fury. "You'll regret this, Ethan," he spat. "You've made a powerful enemy." I just glared at him as he turned and stomped back to his car, leaving a trail of dust in his wake. I knew I had made a dangerous decision, but I couldn't live with myself if I lied to protect those criminals. Now I had to prepare for the storm that was coming, a storm that threatened to destroy everything I had worked so hard to build. Would my past mistakes ruin everything I had now? The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The authorities contacted me, and I told them everything I knew about the fraudulent activities at my former firm. I provided them with documents, emails, and names. I held nothing back. My testimony helped them build a strong case against the perpetrators, including Chad's bosses. As I cooperated with the investigation, I braced myself for the retaliation. I knew that Chad and his cronies wouldn't let this go easily. I reinforced the security around my farm, installed cameras, and warned my family to be vigilant. I even considered hiring a lawyer, but I didn't want to spend my hard-earned money on legal fees. I decided to handle things myself. One night, as I was walking back to the house after a long day in the fields, I noticed a strange car parked near the barn. I cautiously approached the vehicle, and I saw two men lurking in the shadows. They were Chad's goons, the same guys who had threatened me on my property. My heart pounded in my chest, but I stood my ground. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. The men smirked. "We're here to send you a message," one of them said, pulling out a crowbar. "Chad wants you to know that you can't cross him without consequences." They lunged at me, and I instinctively raised my arms to defend myself. I had never been in a real fight before, but I wasn't about to let these thugs intimidate me. I dodged the crowbar and landed a punch on one of the men's faces. He stumbled backward, clutching his nose. The other man swung at me, but I ducked and kicked him in the shins. He yelped in pain and fell to the ground. I continued to fight, using every ounce of strength and adrenaline I had. I punched, kicked, and shoved until both men were bruised, battered, and bleeding. Finally, they gave up and ran back to their car, speeding away into the night. I stood there, panting and bruised but victorious. I had defended my farm and my family, but I knew that this was just the beginning. Chad would not give up so easily. He would come back, and he would come back stronger. So I decided to take the fight to him. I would expose his crimes, ruin his reputation, and make him pay for what he had done. How could I use this victory to turn the tables on them? I spent the next few days gathering evidence against Chad. I contacted my old colleagues, the ones who had been disgusted by the fraudulent activities at the firm. I convinced them to testify against Chad, promising them anonymity and protection. I also hired a private investigator to dig into Chad's personal life, hoping to uncover any dirt that could be used against him. The investigator discovered that Chad had been involved in several shady deals, including insider trading and tax evasion. He had been living a lavish lifestyle, funded by ill-gotten gains. I compiled all the evidence I had gathered and presented it to the authorities. They were impressed by my thoroughness and promised to investigate Chad immediately. Within days, Chad was arrested and charged with multiple felonies. His reputation was ruined, his assets were frozen, and his future was in tatters. He had finally paid the price for his greed and corruption. As I watched Chad being led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I had avenged my family, my community, and myself. I had stood up to the bullies and won, but I knew that the fight was not over. There were still others who had been involved in the fraudulent activities at the firm, and I was determined to bring them all to justice. I would not rest until every last one of them had been held accountable for their crimes. It was time to expose the whole corrupt system and build a better future for everyone. How would I continue to fight for justice and protect the innocent? With Chad behind bars, the remaining conspirators began to panic. They knew that I was coming after them, and they tried to cover their tracks, destroying evidence and intimidating witnesses. But I was one step ahead of them. I had anticipated their moves and had gathered enough evidence to expose their crimes. One by one, they were arrested and charged. The financial firm that had once been a symbol of success and power was now a den of criminals. The scandal made national headlines, and the public was outraged. People demanded justice, and the authorities responded. The corrupt executives were sentenced to lengthy prison terms, and the firm was forced to pay millions of dollars in fines. The victims of the fraud received compensation, and the financial system was reformed to prevent such crimes from happening again. As I watched the downfall of my former firm, I felt a sense of closure. I had finally put my past behind me and had built a new life based on honesty, integrity, and purpose. I was no longer ashamed of my farming roots. In fact, I was proud of them. I had learned that true success is not measured by wealth or power, but by the impact you have on the world. And I was determined to continue making a positive impact, one farm, one community, one person at a time. What lasting changes could I make to ensure such corruption never happens again? I dedicated myself to promoting sustainable agriculture, supporting local businesses, and advocating for ethical financial practices. I became a voice for the voiceless, a champion for the underdog, and a defender of justice. I used my experiences to educate others about the dangers of greed and corruption and to inspire them to live lives of purpose and integrity. My farm became a model for sustainable agriculture, attracting visitors from all over the world. I shared my knowledge and experience with other farmers, helping them to improve their practices and to build thriving businesses. I also worked with local schools and organizations to educate children about the importance of healthy food, environmental stewardship, and community involvement. I became a mentor to young people, guiding them on their paths to success and helping them to avoid the pitfalls of greed and corruption. I shared my story with them, showing them that it is possible to overcome adversity and to build a better future. And I encouraged them to embrace their roots, to value their families, and to give back to their communities. As I looked back on my journey, I realized that I had come full circle. I had started as a city boy who was ashamed of his farming roots, and I had ended as a farmer who was proud of his heritage. I had transformed my life from one of greed and ambition to one of purpose and service. And I had learned that the greatest revenge is not to inflict pain on your enemies, but to build a better world for everyone. My life was now filled with purpose, and I knew that I was making a difference. I had found my true calling, and I was finally at peace. The farm had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and justice, and I was proud to be a part of it. But even as the farm flourished and my life settled into a comfortable rhythm, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It wasn't a grand ambition or a burning desire, but a quiet yearning for connection, for someone to share this life with. My days were filled with purpose, but my nights were often lonely. I had friends in the community, people I enjoyed spending time with, but none of them quite filled the void. I dated occasionally, meeting women at local events or through mutual friends, but nothing ever seemed to click. They were kind, intelligent, and attractive, but there was always something missing, some spark that just wasn't there. I began to wonder if I was destined to be alone, forever surrounded by fields of corn, but isolated in my own heart. Was I meant to find love amidst the rows of crops, or would my past keep me from finding my future partner? One particularly beautiful summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I found myself sitting on the porch, sipping a glass of iced tea and watching the fireflies dance in the fields. My parents had gone to visit my sister in the city, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I started thinking about all the things I had accomplished, the challenges I had overcome, and the life I had built for myself. I was proud of what I had achieved, but I couldn't help feeling a sense of melancholy. I longed for someone to share these moments with, someone to laugh with, to dream with, to simply be with. As if in answer to my thoughts, a car pulled into the driveway. I squinted, trying to make out who it was in the fading light. To my surprise, it was a woman I had never seen before. She stepped out of the car, and my heart skipped a beat. She was tall and slender, with long, flowing brown hair and piercing blue eyes. She had a warm smile and a kind demeanor that immediately put me at ease. Who was this mysterious stranger, and what brought her to my farm? She walked towards me, her steps confident and graceful. "Hi," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "I'm Sarah. I'm a photographer, and I heard about your farm. I was wondering if I could take some pictures." I was intrigued. I had never had a photographer visit the farm before, but I was always open to new experiences. "Of course," I said, smiling back at her. "I'd be happy to show you around." And just like that, my life took another unexpected turn. Sarah spent the next few days at the farm, capturing the beauty of the land, the animals, and the people. She had a keen eye for detail and a talent for capturing the essence of things. She seemed to see the farm in a way that I had never seen it before, highlighting its charm and its character. As I showed her around, I found myself drawn to her. She was intelligent, curious, and passionate about her work. She asked insightful questions and listened intently to my answers. She seemed genuinely interested in learning about the farm, about my family, and about me. We spent hours talking, sharing our stories, our dreams, and our fears. I discovered that she had grown up in a small town in Vermont and had always had a love for nature and the outdoors. She had traveled the world, capturing images of exotic landscapes and fascinating cultures. But she had always longed to return to a simpler life, to a place where she could connect with the land and the community. As the days passed, I found myself falling for her. Her beauty, her intelligence, her kindness, and her passion captivated me. I had never met anyone like her before, but I was also hesitant. I had been hurt in the past, and I was afraid of opening myself up to someone again. What if she didn't feel the same way about me? What if she was just passing through, and my heart would be broken once again? Despite my fears, I couldn't deny the connection I felt with her. It was as if we had known each other for a lifetime. I knew that I had to take a chance, to risk everything for the possibility of love. But what if my past demons were to resurface, threatening this newfound chance at happiness? One evening, as we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, I decided to tell her how I felt. I took a deep breath and said, "Sarah, I have something to tell you." She looked at me, her eyes filled with anticipation. "I've really enjoyed spending time with you," I continued, my voice trembling slightly. "I think you're an amazing person, and I'm starting to develop feelings for you." She smiled, her eyes sparkling with delight. "I feel the same way about you, Ethan," she said. "I've been trying to hide it, but I can't anymore." I was overjoyed. My heart soared with happiness. I leaned in and kissed her, and it was the most magical kiss I had ever experienced. In that moment, I knew that I had found something special, something worth fighting for. But our newfound happiness was soon threatened by an unexpected visitor. Just as Sarah and I were starting to plan our future together, my former rival, Chad, reappeared, this time with a proposition that could change everything. Why was he back, and what did he want from me now? Chad's arrival sent a chill down my spine. He stood there slick as ever, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the overalls I was wearing. "Ethan," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "long time no see. I heard you've been doing well for yourself here. Impressive, really." I narrowed my eyes. "What do you want, Chad?" I asked, cutting to the chase. He chuckled, a hollow sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Straight to the point, as always. I like that. Look, Ethan, things haven't been going so well for me lately. The investigation, the trials, it's all been a bit of a mess." I raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "And how does that concern me?" "Well," he said, leaning in conspiratorially, "let's just say I have some information that could be very valuable to you. Information that could help you protect your farm, your family, everything you've worked so hard for." My gut clenched. I didn't trust Chad as far as I could throw him. "What kind of information?" I asked cautiously. He smirked. "Information about a new development project that's being planned for this area. A project that could potentially put your farm out of business." My blood ran cold. A development project? Here, that couldn't be good. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. Chad explained that a large corporation was planning to build a massive industrial complex on the outskirts of town. The complex would bring jobs and economic growth to the area, but it would also have a devastating impact on the environment and the local farms. They're planning to reroute the water supply, Chad said, which would leave your farm high and dry. They're also going to release pollutants into the air and the soil, which could contaminate your crops. I was horrified. This was a disaster waiting to happen. How do you know all this? I asked. Chad shrugged. Let's just say I have connections. People who are willing to share information for a price. My mind raced. I needed to find out more about this project to verify Chad's claims, but I also knew that I couldn't trust him. He was probably trying to manipulate me to use me for his own gain. What's the price, Chad? I asked, steeling myself for what was to come. He smiled, a predatory glint in his eyes. Let's just say I need a little assistance with my legal troubles. A little testimony, perhaps, that might paint me in a more favorable light. I should have known. He wanted me to lie for him to help him escape justice, but I couldn't do it. I wouldn't betray my principles, not even to save my farm. I can't help you, Chad, I said, my voice firm. I won't lie for you. I won't compromise my integrity. Chad's face darkened. You're making a mistake, Ethan, he said, his voice laced with menace. This development project is going to happen whether you like it or not, and if you don't cooperate, you'll lose everything. I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated. I'm not afraid of you, Chad, I said. I'll fight this project with everything I have. I'll protect my farm, my family, and my community. Chad scoffed. You're just a farmer, Ethan, he said. You can't stop progress. Maybe not, I said, but I can sure as hell try. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Chad standing there, seething with anger. I knew I had made a powerful enemy, but I had also made a commitment to fight for what was right. I had to find a way to stop this development project, to protect my farm and my community. But how could I, a simple farmer, take on a powerful corporation? The odds seemed insurmountable. Sarah, sensing my distress, rushed to my side. I relayed everything Chad had revealed, the potential devastation looming over our peaceful existence. Her initial shock quickly turned to determination. She grabbed my hand, her eyes blazing with unwavering resolve. We're in this together, Ethan, she declared. We'll find a way to fight this. Her support fueled my resolve. Together, we would face this challenge head-on. But what would be our first move? How could we possibly gather the resources and support needed to combat such a formidable foe? This was more than just protecting a farm. It was about preserving a way of life. As we stood hand in hand, gazing out at the sprawling fields, we knew the battle had just begun. Could we rally the community to our cause? Or would the promise of progress and prosperity blind them to the impending danger? The next morning, Sarah and I decided to take action. We knew we couldn't fight this battle alone, so we decided to rally the community. We started by calling a meeting at the local town hall, inviting all the farmers and residents who would be affected by the development project. We spent the day spreading the word, knocking on doors, and posting flyers around town. We explained the potential consequences of the project, the environmental damage, the water shortage, and the loss of farmland. We urged people to attend the meeting and to voice their concerns. As the evening approached, I was nervous. I didn't know how many people would show up, or whether they would support our cause. But as I walked into the town hall, I was overwhelmed by what I saw. The room was packed with people, farmers, families, and community leaders, all eager to hear what we had to say. Sarah and I took to the stage and presented our case. We explained the details of the development project, the potential risks, and the alternative solutions. We showed them maps, charts, and data, backing up our claims with solid evidence. We spoke from the heart, sharing our passion for the land, our love for the community, and our commitment to protecting our way of life. As we spoke, I could see the emotions in the room. People were angry, scared, and determined. They were ready to fight for their homes, their farms, and their future. When we finished our presentation, the room erupted in applause. People stood up, cheering and clapping, showing their support for our cause. Several community leaders stepped forward and pledged their assistance, offering their time, their resources, and their expertise. It was a turning point. We had united the community, and we were ready to take on the corporation. But how could we translate this momentum into concrete action? How could we stop the development project from moving forward? The next step was to gather more information and to build a legal case against the corporation. Sarah, with her photography skills, started documenting the beauty of the land and the environmental risks of the project. She took stunning pictures of the fields, the rivers, and the wildlife, showcasing the natural treasures that were at stake. She also interviewed local farmers and residents, capturing their stories and their concerns. Her photos and interviews were powerful and moving, and they helped to raise awareness about the issue. I, with my financial background, started researching the corporation and their development plans. I dug into their financial records, their environmental impact statements, and their legal documents. I discovered that they had a history of cutting corners, ignoring regulations, and exploiting communities. I also found evidence that they had bribed local officials to approve their projects. With this information in hand, we contacted a lawyer who specialized in environmental law. He was impressed by our evidence and agreed to represent us in court. He helped us file a lawsuit against the corporation, alleging that their development project violated environmental regulations and threatened the community's health and safety. The lawsuit was a major step forward, but it was also a risky move. The corporation had deep pockets and powerful lawyers, and they were prepared to fight us every step of the way. We knew that the legal battle would be long and expensive, but we were determined to see it through. In the meantime, we continued to rally the community, organizing protests, writing letters to the editor, and contacting local media. We wanted to keep the pressure on the corporation and to raise public awareness about the issue. Our efforts paid off. The media picked up the story, and the development project became a major controversy. People from all over the state started to take notice, and many expressed their support for our cause. The corporation's reputation began to suffer, and their stock price started to decline. As the pressure mounted, the corporation tried to negotiate with us. They offered us a settlement, promising to reduce the size of the development project and to mitigate some of the environmental damage. But we refused to back down. We knew that their offer was not enough. We wanted them to abandon the project altogether. The negotiations stalled, and the case went to trial. The trial was a tense and dramatic affair. The corporation's lawyers presented a slick and polished case, arguing that the development project was essential for economic growth and that it would not harm the environment. Our lawyer presented a passionate and compelling case, showing the devastating impact the project would have on the community and the environment. Sarah's photos and interviews were shown to the jury, and I testified about the corporation's financial misconduct. The jury deliberated for days and finally reached a verdict. They ruled in our favor, finding that the development project violated environmental regulations and threatened the community's health and safety. The corporation was ordered to abandon the project altogether. We had won, but the victory didn't come without its challenges. Chad, bitter and vengeful, emerged from the shadows, seeking to punish me for his downfall. What new scheme was he plotting, and how could I protect my family from his wrath? The aftermath of the trial was a mix of celebration and anxiety. The community rejoiced, celebrating their victory over the corporation. There were parades, parties, and heartfelt expressions of gratitude. People thanked Sarah and me for our leadership and our commitment to fighting for what was right. But amidst the celebration, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Chad was still out there, and I knew he wouldn't let this go easily. I had ruined his life, exposed his crimes, and cost him his freedom. He had every reason to seek revenge. I started to receive anonymous threats, both online and in the mail. The messages were chilling, warning me that I would pay for what I had done. I tried to ignore them, but they started to wear me down. I couldn't sleep at night, and I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I knew that Chad was capable of anything, and I was afraid for my family's safety. One day, as I was working in the fields, I noticed a strange car parked near the edge of my property. I cautiously approached the vehicle, and I saw Chad sitting inside. My heart pounded in my chest. I hadn't seen him since his arrest, and he looked even more menacing than I remembered. He stepped out of the car, his eyes filled with hatred. "Hello, Ethan," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "I see you're still playing farmer, how quaint." I glared at him, refusing to be intimidated. "What do you want, Chad?" I asked. He chuckled, a hollow sound that sent shivers down my spine. "I just wanted to congratulate you on your victory," he said. "You really showed me you're a true hero." I didn't believe him for a second. "Get off my property, Chad," I said. "I don't want anything to do with you," he smirked. "Oh, but I'm afraid that's not possible, Ethan," he said. "You see, I have a little something for you, a little reminder of our past." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, metallic object. I recognized it immediately. It was a flash drive, the same flash drive that contained all the evidence of Chad's crimes. You thought you had all the evidence, didn't you? Chad said, his eyes gleaming with malice. But I made a copy. And now I'm going to use it to destroy you. He explained that he had sent copies of the flash drive to various media outlets, accusing me of being involved in the fraudulent activities at our former firm. He claimed that I had used my knowledge of the crimes to enrich myself and that I had betrayed my colleagues to save my own skin. The accusations were false, but they were damaging. They threatened to ruin my reputation, to destroy my credibility, and to undermine everything I had worked so hard to achieve. I was horrified. I had thought I had put my past behind me, but it had come back to haunt me. Chad was determined to destroy me, and he had found a way to do it. "Why are you doing this, Chad?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "Why can't you just leave me alone?" He laughed. "Because I hate you, Ethan," he said. "You ruined my life, and now I'm going to ruin yours." He turned and walked back to his car, leaving me standing there, stunned and defeated. I knew that I had to act quickly to protect myself and my family. But how could I fight these accusations? How could I prove my innocence? Chad's plan was working perfectly. The media outlets picked up the story, and the accusations against me spread like wildfire. People started to doubt me, to question my motives, and to turn against me. My reputation, which I had worked so hard to rebuild, was crumbling before my eyes. I felt like I was losing everything: my farm, my family, and my community. Sarah stood by my side, supporting me and encouraging me to fight back. She knew that the accusations were false, and she believed in me. But even her support couldn't ease my pain and my fear. I was desperate, and I didn't know what to do. Then I received an unexpected phone call. It was from an old colleague, someone who had worked with Chad at our former firm. He had heard about the accusations against me, and he wanted to help. He explained that he had evidence that could prove my innocence, evidence that Chad had manipulated the data and framed me for the crimes. He was willing to testify on my behalf, to clear my name and to expose Chad's lies. I was overjoyed. This was the break I had been waiting for. With this new evidence, I could fight back against Chad and clear my name. But could I trust this colleague? Was he telling the truth, or was he setting me up for another fall? The stakes were high, and I couldn't afford to make another mistake. Could I trust this last-minute ally, or was it just another trap set by Chad? I decided to trust my colleague, despite my reservations. I had no other choice. He was my only hope of clearing my name and exposing Chad's lies. I met with him in secret, and he provided me with the evidence he had promised. It was a treasure trove of information, emails, documents, and recordings that proved Chad had manipulated the data and framed me for the crimes. I was relieved and grateful. With this evidence, I could finally fight back against Chad and reclaim my reputation. I contacted my lawyer and presented him with the new evidence. He was impressed and immediately filed a motion to dismiss the accusations against me. He also filed a lawsuit against Chad, accusing him of defamation and malicious prosecution. The legal battle was on, and this time I had the upper hand. The media picked up the story, and the tide began to turn. People started to realize that Chad had been lying and that I was the victim of his revenge plot. The accusations against me were dropped, and my reputation began to recover. Chad, on the other hand, was in serious trouble. The new evidence exposed his crimes, and he was facing even more charges. He was desperate and cornered, and he lashed out in anger. He started to threaten my family, sending them harassing messages and making veiled threats against their safety. I was furious. He had gone too far. He had crossed the line. I vowed to protect my family, no matter what it took. I hired a security firm to protect my home and my farm. I also obtained a restraining order against Chad, prohibiting him from contacting my family. I was determined to keep him away from them to ensure their safety. But I knew that Chad was unpredictable and dangerous, and I couldn't let my guard down. One night, as Sarah and I were sitting on the porch, we heard a noise outside. We cautiously went to investigate, and we saw a figure lurking in the shadows. It was Chad. He was armed with a gun. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. The moment I had been dreading. Chad pointed the gun at me, his eyes filled with rage. "You ruined my life, Ethan," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "Now I'm going to ruin yours." Sarah stepped in front of me, shielding me from the gun. "Don't do this, Chad," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This isn't the answer." Chad ignored her and aimed the gun at me again. I knew that I had to act quickly to protect myself and Sarah. I lunged at Chad, tackling him to the ground. The gun went off, and a bullet whizzed past my ear. I wrestled with Chad, trying to disarm him. He was strong and desperate, and he fought back with everything he had. We rolled around on the ground, punching, kicking, and scratching. Finally, I managed to grab the gun and throw it away. I pinned Chad to the ground, holding him down until the police arrived. The police arrested Chad, and he was taken into custody. He was charged with attempted murder, assault, and violation of the restraining order. He was facing a long prison sentence. As I stood there, bruised and battered but alive, I felt a sense of relief. It was finally over. Chad was gone and my family was safe. But the experience had shaken me to the core. I had come face to face with my past and I had almost lost everything. I realized that I couldn't run away from my past. I had to confront it to learn from it and to move on. The trial against Chad was swift and decisive. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. He would spend the rest of his days behind bars, paying for his crimes. As I watched him being led away, I felt a sense of closure. I had finally gotten justice for myself, for my family, and for my community. Chad was gone, and I could finally move on with my life. But even as Chad was being led away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. His eyes held a strange glimmer, a hint of triumph amidst the defeat. What final trick did he have up his sleeve, and how would it affect my future? In the months that followed, life on the farm slowly returned to normal. The community rallied around me and my family, offering their support and their friendship. I was grateful for their kindness and their loyalty. I continued to work on the farm, growing crops, raising animals, and building a sustainable business. I also became involved in local politics, advocating for environmental protection, economic justice, and community development. I wanted to use my experiences to make a positive impact on the world. Sarah and I grew closer, our love deepening with each passing day. We were a team, supporting each other, challenging each other, and loving each other unconditionally. We started to plan our future together, dreaming of a life filled with love, laughter, and adventure. But even as I looked forward to the future, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Chad's eyes, that strange glimmer of triumph, haunted my dreams. I knew that he was a master manipulator, and I couldn't believe that he would accept defeat so easily. I started to investigate Chad's past, digging into his family history, his business dealings, and his personal relationships. I discovered that he had a long history of deception, manipulation, and violence. He had hurt many people in his life, and he had always managed to escape the consequences. I also learned that he had a secret network of associates, people who were loyal to him and willing to do his bidding. These associates were scattered throughout the country, working in various industries and professions. They were Chad's eyes and ears, his spies and his enforcers. I realized that Chad was still a threat, even from behind bars. He was using his network of associates to plot his revenge, to undermine my life, and to hurt my family. I didn't know what he was planning, but I knew that I had to be prepared. I contacted the authorities and shared my concerns with them. They promised to investigate Chad's associates, but they were skeptical. They believed that I was being paranoid, that Chad was no longer a threat. But I knew better. I knew that Chad was a dangerous and cunning enemy, and I couldn't afford to underestimate him. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I hired a private investigator to track Chad's associates, to uncover their plans, and to expose their crimes. The investigator was a skilled and experienced professional, and he quickly gathered valuable information. He discovered that Chad's associates were planning to sabotage my farm, to contaminate my crops, and to harm my animals. They were also planning to spread false rumors about me, to damage my reputation, and to undermine my business. I was horrified. Chad was determined to destroy me, and he was using his associates to carry out his plans. I knew that I had to act quickly to protect myself and my family. I contacted the authorities again and presented them with the evidence gathered by the investigator. This time, they took me seriously. They launched a full-scale investigation into Chad's associates, arresting them one by one. The sabotage plot was foiled, and my farm was saved. The false rumors were exposed, and my reputation was cleared. Chad's network of associates was dismantled, and his revenge plot was thwarted. As I watched Chad's associates being led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of relief. I had finally defeated him. He could no longer hurt me or my family. But even as Chad's network was crumbling, I received a mysterious package in the mail. It was a video recording. I hesitated, then pressed play. What final message awaited me from my nemesis? The video started with a grainy image of Chad sitting in his prison cell. He looked gaunt and pale, but his eyes still burned with hatred. "Hello, Ethan," he said, his voice raspy and weak. "I know you think you've won. You think you've destroyed me, but you're wrong. I'm still here. And I'm still going to get my revenge." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I have one last surprise for you, Ethan," he said. "A surprise that will destroy everything you hold dear." He explained that he had discovered a dark secret about Sarah's past, a secret that she had been hiding from me. He claimed that Sarah had been involved in a crime, a serious crime, and that she had changed her name and moved to the country to escape the authorities. He said that he had contacted the authorities and informed them about Sarah's past. He claimed that they were investigating her and that she would soon be arrested. I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. Was it possible that Sarah had been lying to me all along? Was she a criminal hiding from the law? I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the possibility. Chad had never lied to me before, and he had always been one step ahead of me. I decided to confront Sarah. I showed her the video and asked her to tell me the truth. She looked at the video, her face pale and drawn. She started to cry. "It's true, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling with fear. "I have a past that I'm not proud of." She explained that she had been involved in a crime when she was younger. She had made a mistake, a terrible mistake, and she had paid the price for it. She had served her time in prison, and she had tried to put her past behind her. She had changed her name, moved to the country, and started a new life. She had hoped that no one would ever find out about her past, but Chad had discovered it. I was heartbroken. I loved Sarah, but I didn't know if I could trust her. She had lied to me, and she had kept a dark secret from me. I needed time to think, to process everything she had told me. I walked out of the house and went for a walk in the fields. I needed to clear my head, to sort out my thoughts, and to decide what to do. As I walked, I thought about everything that had happened. I had overcome so many challenges, I had fought so hard to build a better life, and now it was all threatened by Sarah's past. I didn't know what to do. Should I stay with Sarah or should I leave her? Could I trust her or should I turn her into the authorities? My heart was torn. I loved her, but I also valued honesty and integrity. I didn't know what to do. Then I remembered something my father had told me. He had said that everyone makes mistakes, and that the true measure of a person is not their past, but their present. He had said that forgiveness is the most important virtue, and that love can conquer all. I realized that my father was right. Sarah had made a mistake, but she had paid the price for it. She had changed her life, and she had become a better person. She had been honest with me, and she had shown me her true self. I realized that I loved her, and that I couldn't imagine my life without her. I decided to forgive her. I returned to the house and told her how I felt. I said that I loved her and that I wanted to stay with her. I said that I trusted her and that I believed in her. She was overjoyed. She hugged me tightly, and she thanked me for my love and my forgiveness. We decided to face her past together. We contacted a lawyer and prepared to defend her against the authorities. We knew that it would be a difficult battle, but we were determined to fight for our love and for our future. But as we prepared for the fight, the authorities arrived. They were there to arrest Sarah. What would happen now? Would our love survive this final test? As the officers placed Sarah under arrest, a wave of despair washed over me. It felt like everything I had fought for, everything I had rebuilt, was crumbling before my eyes. But amidst the chaos, I saw a flicker of hope in Sarah's eyes. She squeezed my hand, whispering, "It's going to be okay, Ethan. We'll get through this." Her unwavering strength gave me the courage to face what was to come. The next few days were a blur of legal consultations, frantic phone calls, and sleepless nights. Our lawyer assured us that Sarah's past crime was a nonviolent offense and that she had already served her time. He believed we had a strong case to argue for leniency and a chance for her to remain free. But the fear of the unknown weighed heavily on my heart. I couldn't bear the thought of losing Sarah, of seeing her locked away again. As the court date approached, the community rallied behind us. They knew Sarah as a kind, compassionate, and hardworking member of society. They testified to her character, her contributions to the farm, and her dedication to the community. Their support was overwhelming and gave me renewed hope that justice would prevail. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed with supporters. Sarah stood tall and proud as she addressed the judge, expressing her remorse for her past actions and her commitment to living an honest and productive life. She spoke from the heart, her voice filled with sincerity and emotion. I watched her, my heart swelling with love and admiration. She was a remarkable woman, and I was determined to fight for her. Our lawyer presented a compelling case, arguing that Sarah had already paid her debt to society and that she posed no threat to the community. He highlighted her positive contributions and her unwavering commitment to a better future. The prosecution, however, argued that Sarah had concealed her past and that she should be held accountable for her actions. They painted her as a deceitful and dangerous criminal, attempting to sway the judge with fear and prejudice. After hearing both sides, the judge recessed to deliberate. The wait was agonizing. Sarah and I held hands, praying for a favorable outcome. Finally, the judge returned. He cleared his throat and announced his decision. He acknowledged Sarah's past crime, but he also recognized her rehabilitation and her positive contributions to the community. He ruled that she would not be sent back to prison. Instead, he sentenced her to community service and ordered her to continue her work on the farm. A collective sigh of relief filled the courtroom. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she embraced me, whispering, "Thank you, Ethan. Thank you for believing in me." I held her close, my heart overflowing with joy and gratitude. We had overcome the final hurdle and our love had prevailed. As we left the courthouse hand in hand, I knew that our journey was far from over. We would still face challenges and obstacles, but we would face them together, with love, trust, and unwavering commitment. Chad's final attempt to destroy us had failed, but I knew that he would never truly give up. He would always be a dark presence in our lives, a reminder of the past we had overcome. But I refused to let him define our future. I was determined to live a life filled with purpose, joy, and love. And with Sarah by my side, I knew that anything was possible. We returned to the farm, greeted by a cheering crowd of supporters. We celebrated our victory, sharing food, laughter, and heartfelt expressions of gratitude. As the sun set over the fields, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I felt a sense of peace and contentment wash over me. I had finally found my place in the world. I was a farmer, a community leader, and a loving partner. And I was ready to embrace whatever the future held, with Sarah by my side. But as I looked out over the horizon, I noticed a small, black cloud forming in the distance. It was a storm cloud, gathering strength and heading our way. Was it just a passing storm, or was it a sign of more trouble to come? The final chapter of our story was yet to be written. As the years passed, Sarah and I built a beautiful life together on the farm. We expanded our crops, welcomed new animals, and created a thriving agritourism business. We became pillars of the community, supporting local schools, charities, and organizations. We were happy, fulfilled, and deeply in love. But even as our lives flourished, I couldn't shake the feeling that Chad was still out there, plotting his revenge. I knew that he was a patient man, and that he would wait for the perfect opportunity to strike. I kept a watchful eye on my surroundings, always vigilant for any sign of trouble. I installed a state-of-the-art security system on the farm, and I trained my family and my employees to be aware of their surroundings and to report any suspicious activity. I was determined to protect my loved ones from Chad's wrath. One day, as I was working in the fields, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered the call. A distorted voice spoke on the other end. "Hello, Ethan," the voice said. "Remember me?" My blood ran cold. I recognized the voice immediately. It was Chad. "What do you want, Chad?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm out," he said. "I've been released from prison." I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. How had he managed to get out? "What are you planning, Chad?" I asked. "I'm planning to come visit you, Ethan," he said. "I have a little surprise for you." The line went dead. I was terrified. Chad was free and he was coming after me. I didn't know what he was planning, but I knew that it couldn't be good. I rushed back to the house and told Sarah everything. She was just as scared as I was. We decided to contact the authorities, but they were dismissive. They said that Chad had served his time and that he was free to live his life. They couldn't do anything unless he committed a crime. I was frustrated and angry. The authorities were failing to protect me and my family. I knew that I had to take matters into my own hands. I contacted my private investigator and asked,